بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه.
The title of you, as you've seen, is it wrong to reason the role of the intellect in Islam? Okay. And let's take a reality check. How many people have, a smartphone or cellular phone or some kind of gizmo or doohickey in their pocket, right? And it's hard to imagine some years ago how we survived without cellular phones, or a few years back how we survived without computers. The advances in technology and the ability now to describe the natural world, and not only to describe it, but to tame those laws, to build useful devices and neat gadgets, has really presented an unprecedented challenge to faith. And this is all around us, even if we're not courageous enough to talk about it in our places of worship. And this challenge, people have really taken different perspectives on it. So we see a lot of people turning to atheism and agnosticism. So they reject the existence of God with or without an explanation. And that is their right. But I'm just stating the state of what's around us. Others are forced to compartmentalize their religion and their profession because they cannot reconcile them. And I think the easiest story to communicate this, there was a religious scientist who was a devout Christian but also an excellent scientist. And he was asked, how do you balance your religion and your science? He said, I keep my science on one half of my brain, I keep my religion on the other. And again, that is his right. And before we start today's discussion, I affirm, as the Quran affirmed, that the right to religious freedom and the right to self-determination is a human value. It's also an American value enshrined in our Bill of Rights. But for us as Muslims, or for those in the audience that are Muslims, it is also an Islamic value, captured in the Quran more than 1,000 years before the Bill of Rights. The Quran said, Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter number 2, verse number 256, La ikraha fi ad-din, let there be no compulsion in religion. And so as Muslims, we believe that if God Himself gave people the right to believe in Him or not to believe in Him, then it is not for any human being to take that right from another. But after setting the rules for the conversation, the Quran takes a fascinating, unapologetic stance for what it claims is the truth. And this is the beauty that we have to learn in our intellectual discourses. How to have an opinion that we're passionate about and we believe in, but also be able to engage with other opinions that might differ from ours. And so the Quran sets forth an argument that is distinct from what I've described. Different from the rejection of God, but also different from the compartmentalization of religion and science. Actually, can I be honest with you guys? Is that okay? I got approval, alhamdulillah. There is something in the Quran that really gave me trouble for many, many years. Because I would interact in my profession with a lot of people that don't have a religion or don't believe in God. And the Quran spoke about many different types of people. It spoke about those that associate partners with God. It associated about different faith systems. It talked about historical nations. And it spoke about those that reject God. But what always shocked me, the Quran never directly poses the question, does God exist? Because I was always looking in the Quran, because I thought that would be like the starting point verse. Oh, look here, it says, does God exist? There's the answer. But I could never find that verse. In fact, the verse doesn't exist. The topic is covered, but never directly stated as a question. And it was really only this year that it started to dawn on me perhaps part of the wisdom why. When you start to read the Quran starts directly addressing you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. It starts speaking in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. And it starts describing God. It says that we will never comprehend the true greatness of God, but God is not an abstract being that we know nothing about. The Quran describes some of the attributes of God in language that we can understand. And it takes us from branch matters to universal matters. And so the first power of God that was mentioned in the Quran is the mastery over the last day, not the mastery over our minor quibbles and problems. And so the Quran shifts the whole discussion. The discussion isn't, do you believe that God exists? The question is, do you believe that it's really God speaking to you? Do you really believe that God Himself is addressing you in the Quran? And I have to emphasize here, and I'm someone who respects religious traditions and scriptures that people hold dear and sacred. But one of the unique features of the Quran, even amongst other religious scriptures, is many scriptures, their believers believe that it is a mix of human words and words ascribed to the divine. Even the Bible, you can buy versions, for example, of the King James Bible where the words ascribed to the divine are highlighted in red. And the words ascribed to man are not. They're in black. And this is according to the followers of the Bible. So the followers of the Quran believe how much of the Quran is ascribed to the divine. All of it. So much so that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, Prophet Muhammad, forbade his followers from writing his own words for the majority of his life, fearful at the possibility that it would be mixed. And so the words of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the man, were always kept very distinct and different from the words of the Holy Quran. So the Quran forms the challenge, فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُؤْمِنُونَ? Do you really believe? But then, something happens. I'll tell you this something in a story that's really moving. The Arabs before I get to the Quran actually, the Arabs before Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, you know, they lived around the Kaaba, the tribe of the Prophet. Who can picture the Kaaba in their mind? Everybody got it? Oh, you guys are getting me worried. We got it? Good. I see some hands. The Kaaba was there and held significance. And in fact, the Hajj pilgrimage, though not in the form that is done by Muslims today, was still a gathering for the Arab tribes before Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And so, the Arabs themselves, did they believe in God or not? Before the Prophet Muhammad. They did. They believed in God. Did they believe He created the heavens and the earth? They did. Did they believe He created them? They did. Did they believe He fed them and created their food and sustenance? All these things the Arabs ascribed to God. But they worshipped idols to draw them closer to God. But in the Hajj pilgrimage, the Arabs would interact with those that did not believe in a God. And so once the Arab man was asked, why do you believe in God? And he gave a fascinating answer. He said, I know of the presence of my camel by this. He pointed at the ground, at the camel droppings. And I apologize for the tech generation in the room. I have to take you back to a time before the GPS and the iPhone. So I want you to look at the depth of what the Arab is saying. He's saying not only do I know the presence of the camel in his absence by what he left behind, but actually this, ugly thing, this thing that we would all, not want to come anywhere near, was very useful in tracking the desert. and in seeing were there animals nearby. So they got useful information from something that's repulsive to any human being. The analogy is not direct, but the analogy is powerful. Because now, the poet, for example, Abutaleb says, وَلَهُ فِي كُلِّ شَيْءٍ آيَةٍ تَدُلُّ عَلَىٰ أَنَّهُ وَاحِدٌ. Now the whole creation of the heavens and the earth, the Quran challenges, are traces of the Creator. And if something repulsive like this can lead us to recognition of the existence of the camel, then what about the beauty and the perfection in the heavens and the earth? The traces of what the Creator created, that is accessible and can be touched and explored by us. So back to, everybody remember the two sides of the brain? A half for what? My science, and a half for the religion. The Quran takes the exact opposite approach. The Quran is not afraid of our scientific discoveries. In fact, the Quran challenges people to seek the secrets of the heavens and the earth. Because the Quran claims that true knowledge and depth of wisdom leads to the oneness of the Almighty. This is captured in a beautiful story for our mother, Aisha. May Allah be pleased with her, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. She was asked, what was the most incredible thing you witnessed for the Messenger of Allah? She said, what was it that the Messenger did that wasn't incredible? Everything about him was incredible. But she mentioned one night. She said they were together at night in the home, and he sought her permission to leave her for a while and pray to Allah. And Aisha said, I love your company, but I love your comfort more than what I wish. And so she gave him permission. She said she watched him. He stood up, he purified himself, and he stood in prayer and he cried. And then she said he bowed and he cried. And he stood and he wept. And then he prostrated and he wept. And this continued. She said at every different position she would describe that first his beard became wet, and then his chest became wet, and then even the ground underneath him became wet with his tears. Until Bilal came to raise the adhan for Salat al-Fajr, and he found the Messenger of Allah ﷺ weeping. So you know how we are like before finals and the day after finals? Or should I say when the grades come out? Like before we know we've made it, and after we know we're there. Sayyidina Bilal's question kind of has that flavor to it. He says, O Messenger of Allah, why do you do this when Allah has forgiven everything for you, past and present? The Prophet ﷺ said, shall I not be a grateful servant when on this night there has been a verse revealed to me, woe to the one who hears it and does not contemplate and ponder deeply about its meaning. And then he recited the verses that we open this event with. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Verily, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the night and day are signs for those of intellect. الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ. Those that remember God standing, sitting, and lying on their sides. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And they ponder and reflect deeply, saying, O our Lord, not for nothing have you created all of this. Glory be to you, so save us from the penalty of the fire. So the Quran says that when you attain knowledge, that knowledge leads you to God. But I know there are many incredulous minds out there, because you're thinking of brilliant human beings who are distant from God. And you can't take away anything from their intellectual superiority. So here, we have to examine more deeply the Quranic notion of knowledge and understanding. First of all, anybody know how many times understanding, learning, thinking, and its variants are mentioned in the Holy Quran? Any guesses? How many verses in the Quran? About 6,000. About how many pages in the Medina print? About 600. How many mentions of our topic tonight? Take a guess. I won't throw a tomato at you if you're wrong. Don't worry. 600. Higher or lower? Higher. Lower. Huh? Auction. Yeah. 500? Anybody? Over 850 times. And we believe that a letter of the Quran is invaluable. Its weight cannot be measured. Its worth cannot be measured. So what about something that's so important that's repeated time and time again? Not only that, but it's repeated in its variants. Verses لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ, those that know. And then in other verses, there's people that know but don't understand. So the Quran talks about those يَفْقَهُونَ, those who understand. يَعْقِلُونَ, those that really grasp. Those that have wisdom. Those that have intellect. And the Quran describes the human intellectual journey in its variety, in its power, and in its diversity. Because many people around us, they're running a losing race with Sheikh Google and Maulana Wikipedia. Trust me, a lot of people are running this race. They're stuffing facts in their mind and memorizing this and oh, I've got that and so on, and that's good. But they lack the wisdom and the understanding how to apply these facts, how to synergize between things, the time, place, and manner for application of knowledge or withholding action. And the Quran emphasizes this distinction. This distinction between having information, because we're obsessed with information today, but then what do you do with it? How do you act on it? What is your intention in implementing it? The Quran emphasizes this. So I've been telling you, like everybody's ready to go hit the textbooks, right? Learn and study and science and this. But now the Quran does something incredible. After encouraging us to search for the secrets of the heavens and the earth, the Quran puts the mind in its place. And it says, hold your horses, hold on. Are you acknowledging the limits of human intellect? Or because you've mastered a discipline or two, or think you have, that you think you got the whole world solved and figured out? So many people look in the Quran for a comparison of the knowledge of God with the knowledge of humanity. And they will find no such comparison because the Quran, its meaning emphasizes that there's no comparison to be made. Allah says, وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Allah is not speaking to a scholar or speaking to somebody who's smart or even speaking to humanity. Allah addresses all of creation. And I don't mean the creation that's in this room or in front of us or alive. Past, present, human, non-human. Allah says all of these, you have not been given from knowledge except for a little bit. So I know I'm giving you like a slap, right? You already hit the textbooks, but then the Quran is reining us in. Because this intellectual humility is something that is truly missing from our discourse today. And by the way, I'm giving it to you from a religious perspective. The angels in the Quran say what? Say, Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Glory be to you, O Allah. We have no knowledge except that which you have endowed us with and taught us. You are all-knowing, all-wise. From a religious perspective, right? No, I'm saying this concept. But even from a quote-unquote secular perspective, how many people have stopped and really thought, with all of our iPhones and advancements, do we really have things under control? Is there a home in this room, in their extended family, that has not been touched by cancer? Or by the multitudes of diseases that we have no cure for? Or even sometimes the diseases that the medical profession lacks a diagnosis for? How many physics people in the room? Man, they're all spinning electrons or doing whatever they're doing in their labs, I guess. I was a physics undergrad. You see, the physics people, they walk up to you and they try to fake you out, think they got things figured out. And they try to earnestly hide the fact that the theory of big things, gravity and planets and all this stuff whipping around, and the theory that really effectively describes your cell phone and small things, quantum mechanics, nobody's linked the two yet. Nobody really understands how they put together. See, I see the physicists smiling. Like they were hoping that nobody would figure that out. I let out the secret. Biology. People tell you, man, we got to figure it out. Evolution, they show you this Photoshop thing of this hairy thing turning into me. Right? And you're like, oh man. You're like indoctrinated into this from 6th grade, and so every year you start believing it more and more. Not a biologist on the face of the planet has any clue how to link the theories of microevolution and macroevolution. And I'm not a biologist and I'm ready to debate somebody about it. I'm not going to get into a big science talk, don't worry, I see all these frowns. Okay. But the Quran is teaching us that intellectual humility, that place. And I'll tell you a funny story. Embarrass myself. I was in 6th grade, and our teacher started to teach us about negative numbers. I thought I was so smart. I hadn't heard of negative numbers, but I immediately decreed that this was a useless subject. So I raised my hand and all courageous and stuff before the rest of the class, and I asked the teacher, why are we learning about negative numbers? When am I going to go to the store and buy -6 hamburgers? And the whole class started laughing. Because you know when the ignorant speaks with the rest of the ignorant, right? They all egg each other on. So, ha ha, he figured it out, he's got the teacher. Everybody is laughing here, why? Because we're past that knowledge, right? So we can all see the cluelessness of this group for what it is. And my math teacher put a smile on her face, was a very gentle woman, and taught me a lesson that I'd never forget. That I was opening my mouth, I had no clue what I was talking about. Al-Mutanabbi has an awesome line of poetry. He says, وَكَمْ مِنْ عَائِبٍ قَوْلًا صَحِيحًا وَآفَتُهُ مِنَ الْفَهْمِ السَّقِيمِ. How many people ridicule an accurate statement, and the only fault is in their deficient understanding? Everybody follow? How many people ridicule an accurate statement, and the only deficiency is in their faulty understanding? And so the Prophet ﷺ, I want you to hear this hadith in a new light. He says, do not ponder and reflect about the self of Allah, but reflect on His signs and creations, because you will never ascribe due worth and measure to Him. Can I push you a little bit further? You see people getting bent all out of shape about Jannah. And let's be courageous and honest with each other, right? You hear people speaking about this version of heaven where like the believing men are having a great time and the believing women are sitting on their sides twiddling their thumb. and bored out of their mind. And they take some text here, who knows if it's authentic or not, and build this statement. And then somebody pushes back and builds a flip argument, and so on and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ takes care of it in a single hadith. He was asked about Jannah and he had seen it. He said, in it is what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and has not occurred to the heart or thought of a human being. He's saying our minds are not equipped to understand the totality of what it is. God, from His mercy, doesn't say, heaven is great, let's see who's courageous enough to work for it. But to help us, He gives us some descriptions in language that is digestible to our minds. And also in describing Himself, we believe that no one truly knows the full divine glory and greatness and majesty of God except for God Himself. But nonetheless, Allah described Himself in language that we can partially comprehend. So the worship would be to a being that we partially appreciate, that we understand, we reflect on Him, but then we say at the end, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. And Allah is beyond description. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. There is nothing like Him, and He is all hearing, all seeing, all knowing, excuse me. So Ibn Taymiyyah, and I am absolutely shocked that he said this almost 1,000 years ago, because I would think that he is alive amongst us debating our intellectual scholars of today. He said, revelation came with what is beyond the mind, not what is against the mind. Everybody hear that? Revelation came with what is beyond the mind, not what is against the mind. In other words, when Allah described His attributes, a God that is all-powerful, able to do all things, and chooses to forgive and to have mercy out of power, not weakness. Does that jibe with the foundation of our intellect or not? When you're hiring for a company, you look for the best, brightest, sharpest, or do you look like newspaper ad, failures wanted, underachievers? No, you look for the sharpest saw in the toolbox. Does it make sense that God chooses the worst of humanity to send His prophets? Does it make sense that God would choose prophets that do sins that are so bad, you and I wouldn't even imagine doing them? So Ibn Taymiyyah contended that the foundations of religion are compatible with the mind, but they are beyond the mind. And so Islam was called Islam because of what? Because of submission. That after we see the evidences of God, and we see the perfection of His creation, and we reflect on His oneness, then your mind alone will not take you into the court of God. You must submit your heart and yourself and your being after you've seen those evidences. So after you believe in God, you have to believe in angels. Somebody here design me an experiment or a voltmeter or some fancy measurement device that'll verify that there's angels in this room. Can't do it. It's beyond our perception. But it is incumbent on a person that follows the Muslim faith to believe in the angels simply because of the one who told them they existed, God Himself. We submit our way of life, our way of worship. We believe in angels. We believe in the last day out of this submission to God. And so some people come up to me with a smirk on their faces. They're like, man, you're trying to do the whole religious scientist thing. Prove the existence of God. Many people fall into this trap. You know what my answer to that question is? Take it or leave it. I'm just sharing it. I say God is beyond the scientific method. And God is greater than a mathematical proof. I do not believe a proof in that language of God exists. Because God is greater than the constructs that they are trying to fit this question into. There's a lot to talk about. I feel really shy because, I want to delve into evolution and other topics. And maybe some of the things that come up with the questions, we'll cover them. But I want to close on a note. We've been talking big ideas, talking large things. I want to make sure that we leave this room with an individual mandate, something for us to do. And I want to be honest with you. Too much of our discourse today suggests that it's sheikh or bust, clergy or didn't make it. And we even have this stardom and this celebrity status ascribed to the scholars of religious sciences, and we assume that we'll never attain a nearness to God that they've attained. The Quran has a fascinating verse on this topic. It says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Verily those that are most in awe of God, most reverent of God, are those that are true scholars, endowed with true knowledge. The scholars of tafsir, of explanation of the Quran, they examine this verse, and those familiar with the surah will know that the verse comes amidst a description of worldly miracles, not religious miracles, describing animals and mountains and creation and so on. So many scholars of the Quran said that this word ulama, which is many of us are familiar with as a term for like scholars of fiqh and religious sciences, they said no. Here, the Quran is speaking in the context of this world. It is the scholars of any of the affairs of this world, any of its sciences, any of its arts, any of its disciplines that are beneficial for humanity and draw one closer to God. And that's why this separation between the secular and the sacred, when you examine the Quran deeply, you'll find it's not there. The Prophet, peace be upon him, says, I ask you, he supplicates his Lord, saying, I ask you for knowledge which benefits, knowledge which is useful. He doesn't ask for only religious knowledge. This, I think, on a very individual level, is one of the beautiful, beautiful facets of Islam for those in the room that follow it and those that may not. That nearness to God and nearness to Allah is attained by the sincerity of one's heart and can be practiced with any of God's gifts that He's given you. It doesn't have to be the religious sciences. Don't get me wrong. If you come up after this talk and ask me for a fatwa, a religious ruling, you know what's going to happen to that fatwa? It's going to crumble. Because I'm not a scholar of Islamic law. I don't have the ability to speak about it. It's not my specialty. But do you know the incredible thing about Islam? The reverse applies. Pick your favorite sheikh, the most religious person that, from the outside that you've perceived. If you ask them to build a bridge, you know what's going to happen to that bridge across the Charles River? It's going to crumble. Because God does not lift bridges on pillars of righteousness or blessing. And so Allah made us in need of engineers and architects to build bridges. And then He made us sick so we'd be in need of doctors. And then the doctor comes home, pipe burst in his house, water all over the place, and he's in need of a tradesman that can take care of this problem before his whole house gets soaked and everything's destroyed. And just continue with that line. We need the arts. We need any of the beneficial human disciplines. So any of us, our nearness to God is not capped by what we choose to do, by our gift, but what we choose to do with our gift. And I'll leave you, I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we embark together today and we take a firm intention on embarking on this individual quest for truth, for self-actualization, for real purpose and meaning in our lives. And I've been sharing with you verses that suggest and emphasize that your sincerity in the direction of your heart is as important, in fact, much more important than your intellectual prowess in the faculties of your mind alone. And I'm going to give you a story that's going to give me problems in the question and answer session and blow you out of the water, but I love the story. Some of you have heard it before from me. It is a story that takes place on the streets of Baghdad. Hundreds of years ago, there was a scholar named Al-Razi. Many of you may recognize him. He's respected in both the Western and Eastern traditions. Al-Razi was walking, and in those times there was like a real fanfare and celebrity around religious scholars. I mean, I try to describe it like how you see Paul Pierce walking. I was going to say Kobe Bryant, then I realized I might not walk out alive. So, or a movie celebrity. That fanfare was there with scholars and, professors. I'm sorry, I see a lot of angry faces. Talking about, groupies walking behind professors or something. People are disturbed. But it was happening. On the side of the road was an elderly woman. Ascribe to this woman, be honest with yourself. Put every stereotype in your mind that many people would say about her. Uneducated, doesn't really know what's going on, not able to hang, if you will, with the intellectual strength of this group. This woman didn't know what all this commotion was about. She said, "Who's this?" One of his students said, "Don't you know who this is? This is Al-Razi," and he mentioned one of his most famous works, the one who authored 1,000 evidences and proofs for the existence of God. This is one of his famous intellectual works, debating as scholars at a time. You know how, be honest with yourself, I see you guys trying to fake already. Be honest with yourself. How are you when you see your favorite sports star, some celebrity, right? Starstruck. Your knees are quivering. You can't breathe, much less talk. This woman had an incredible response that shook Al-Razi to his depth. She said, "Subhanallah, glory be to Allah. Had he not had 1,000 doubts, he would not be in need of 1,000 proofs." And I know some of you might think that Al-Razi maybe said, "Old woman, nice, she's so pure, no clue what's going on. I talk to the big scholars." No. Al-Razi recognized the mind of this woman for what it was. So much so that he didn't speak to her directly. He raised his hands in supplication to Allah, and he said, "O Allah, I ask you for faith like the faith of the elderly." What he was capturing is that her faith in God was not gotten by eyes that are closed and a brain that's off. It was a faith that perceived the world such that her mind did not accept as intellectually plausible any reality besides God. Her mind did not accept as intellectually plausible any reality besides God. I'm saying this story, by the way, not to depress everyone. I mean, I'm not there. Maybe, mashallah, all of you are. But I say this story to say that today's a beginning, not an end. Today's the beginning of a journey, not an end. It is a journey that takes work and takes investment. It's not a sudden awakening or a dawn that occurs on your mind where you figure everything out. It takes poking, it takes learning, it takes having the courage to surround yourself with people that know more than you, are better than you, and have a sharper grasp on reality than you do. Until you're able to synergize those realities and come to conclusions of your own. There's much more to discuss, but inshallah I will pause and I'll conclude here and take questions or anything from the audience. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much.
Take as much time, 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. This question is very important. It says what to conclude about, by the way, if you want to raise your hands or share a comment, and this is a discussion, so please feel free. This is a beautiful question. Question says, when you're confronted with a person who, through their individual quest and their journey, has come to the conclusion that there is no God, or let me broaden it and say a different religion or way of life than you, can you conclude that their quest was not sincere? Everybody follow the question? Can you conclude that they weren't sincere in their quest? The Islamic perspective on this and the Quranic perspective is one full of depth. Allah actually tells us in the Quran who's the best person in this room. Tells us exactly who it is. Anybody know which verse? I heard it. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honored of you in the sight of God is the most pious of you, the one with the most taqwa. So, who has it or can point out the person? Raise your hand. Either like I'm it, which is a problem by the way, or if you could point them out. Why are no hands going up? But no, you're not supposed to raise your hand when I say that. You have it? Oh no, you're answering the question, I'm sorry. Why? Anybody, shout it out. The reason is because the thing you're trying to measure is beyond your grasp. Can anybody open up the heart and say, Abutaleb, his taqwa meter, man, look at it tonight. It's like hovering around. Man, where'd they get this guy from? You can't see. Right now, I could literally, and I'm not saying this out of false humility. I say I could be here for all the wrong reasons. I could be the worst person in this room in the sight of Allah, but I'm up here on the podium. I'm not saying it to look humble in front of you. I'm saying it to remind myself. Because the judgment of humanity is left to the one whose gaze pierces our hearts. And it's beyond any of our measures. So in fact, the universals of judgment are set forth in the Quran. There are decisions we're confronted with, and there are consequences to those decisions on a universal level. Crystal clear in the Quran. But individually judging people is not your affair or my affair. It's God's job. It's God's dominion. And this is really important because honestly, it's out of control. You see people calling this guy kafir and that guy this and this guy deviant and oh man, you pray like this with your fingers 2 inches too high so you're like first class ticket to the wrong place. No, this is lack of maturity and understanding on our parts. The universals are clear, but the quest is individual. And let me say, even in the Quran, even in Islamic jurisprudence, there are people who are, for example, outside of the period of prophethood. And their judgment is to Allah. There are people, and I suggest, many scholars suggest that many of our fellow citizens and fellow human beings on earth today fall into this category. People that have gotten such a deceived and corrupted version of what this message is, that they've never had a chance to examine it. And their judgment is to God, and we have to remind ourselves of that. Today, by the way, I give this same talk to audiences that hardly have 5 Muslims in the room. Because my objective is not to just talk to people that believe in this and so on. My objective is, here's what my understanding of the Quran, where's yours? Because it's not there in our discourse today. It's not out there. People know what atheism is. People know what religious people are that run from science. But I think this discourse is something that's really missing. Thoughts, questions, comments, different topic. Before I go to the next round. Yes?
Isn't the best Muslim the one who just looks at themselves and is constantly trying to prove themselves, therefore they wouldn't have time to look around and see and compare themselves to other people?
No. Did everybody hear? Okay. I think this is a very good point, and this is from the character of the Muslim, that they're busy judging themselves, they can't judge others. That being said, like the universals in the Quran are clear, and so we have to be clear about the ideas, and that in general, there is a judgment. The judgment of God goes beyond the outer appearance and so on. But what you said is absolutely correct. This is from the character of the believer, that they give others the benefit of the doubt, think well of others, and discipline and criticize themselves, and that's how you get better. That's a beautiful reflection. Other thoughts, questions, concerns, angry vocalizations of opposition?
My question, so it's following your points about sort of this agility of the human intellect and the need to rely on revelation. Makes sense to me because I already believe in Islam. But my question is about the sort of original choice to accept faith, if that is a decision that people make as an adult. Many of us were born into the faith, so we haven't made that choice. And in particular, about the criteria for making the choice to accept, and if those criteria are independent of Islam, because I have not yet accepted it, what are those criteria? Are they intellectual? Are they emotional? Are they spiritual? To borrow a phrase from sort of Protestant theology, is it simply a leap of faith, or is it an intellectual decision? So sort of what are the criteria made to accept Islam that are independent of Islam, because who are sort of outside of the faith?
Beautiful question. So, first of all, a lot of Muslims do this and drive people of other faiths crazy, right? Why do you believe in the Quran? Because it's from God. How do you know it's God? Because the Quran is the word of God. That's what you're getting at, right? Those circular...
It's not necessarily circular, it's contingent. So
Okay.
much of what you said was contingent for me.
Yeah.
I agree with it, but I guess how do I accept the first premise? Why should I accept it?
Yes. So, first, let me give you a fascinating opinion. I'm not saying it's the majority of opinion, but there's a major scholar, At-Tabari. He said that those born into the faith, in other words, born to Muslim parents, it is incumbent upon them to review their faith and their beliefs one by one and come to an individual conviction about it. I'm not saying if it's a minority or majority opinion, but it's a fascinating thing that says, that emphasizes the concept that is not subject of difference, which is that Islam is not inherited, and it's not a badge. You're not born into it. Okay. Secondly, this links your question with the earlier question. What's the criterion that God is judging us by? Okay. What are the things, how do I know, he went through the process and so he gets this conclusion and that conclusion? Surah Al-Baqarah has a beautiful verse on this. وَقَالُوا كُونُوا هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى تَهْتَدُوا. Some claimed, be a Jew, وَقَالُوا لَنْ يَدْخُلَ الْجَنَّةَ إِلَّا مَنْ كَانَ هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى. They claimed none shall enter paradise except he who is a Jew or a Christian. The Quran challenges this. It says, تِلْكَ أَمَانِيُّهُمْ قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. This is their wishful thinking. Let them bring their proofs if they are truthful. What's everybody expecting in the next verse? No, the Muslim, come on guys, be courageous. The Muslims get a red carpet to paradise and they're doing great and everybody else is like, tough luck. The Quran didn't say that. And many people read Al-Baqarah and totally miss this. بَلَى مَنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ. No, who's the one that's really going to gain this success? It changed it from a group and a belonging and a nation to an action. The one who submits himself wholly to Allah while seeking excellence and perfection in his deeds. فَلَهُ أَجْرُهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. They have their reward with their Lord, and there is no fear upon them, nor shall they grieve. So again, look at what the Quran did. Anybody here can claim to be in the in group or the out group and so on, but you can't claim to me like you are one that does this action. That's something that God knows, and you know, as you examine yourself, if that action is there. So I now want to take the third step and come back to what's that original step. I'll give you an analogy. You know some religious orders, by the way, some Muslim religious orders, when you're like indoctrinated into the group or whatever, they say, all right, first thing, close your eyes. Say this, that, and the other, and do that. I've met people who have done this, I've seen it done. Okay. Close your eyes. That first step in the Quran, Prophet Yusuf describes it, it's described elsewhere in the Quran as ala basira, upon conviction and knowledge and understanding. So it's eyes open. It's the mind's process, but it's also the heart's process. And ultimately, it's really that step, that initial part that I can't measure. I'm not even doing a very good job describing it. But every human being knows their intention behind seeking it. And God Almighty knows what you're looking for. A couple examples, because this is a bit abstract. Ash-Shafi'i, how many people know Ash-Shafi'i? Man, you guys are asleep. Come on. All right, good. Ash-Shafi'i, big time, right? Scholar, knowledgeable. He has an incredible statement. He says, whenever I'd engage in a dialogue with another, I would pray to God that He would cause the truth to come from His tongue, not mine. So when I recognized it, I would be forced to submit to it. Do you catch the analogy I'm making? I'm talking about a dialogue because life is big. In that dialogue, God knows, you know, sometimes we're talking to somebody and I realize I'm totally wrong, right? Little kid comes and says something and I'm on the other opinion and then I realize I'm totally wrong. But what's going on in here? No way, man, I'm not going to be wrong, right? So, no, this, that, where's that problem? Is the problem here? No, the problem is here. The problem is I did not enter that conversation seeking the truth. It's funny but sad story. Sheikh was arguing with his students about a verse that they had both memorized. And he put an extra noon in the word and the kids didn't. They're arguing, they're both insisting. He said, 1 second, I'm going to go get the mushaf. He went to his room, he went to the mushaf, he found, it was like the kids said. So astaghfirullah al-azim, he took a pen and he added the noon. You're laughing, many of us do this. Maybe not with the Quran. Many of us, when we're talking with somebody that we don't like or we have beef with, it's not the truth that we're seeking. It's our ego, it's our whatever. The student, he brought out the Quran, the student said the ink hasn't dried yet. The Quran says about justice, لا يجرمن ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. In weighing your values, don't be pushed away because you don't like someone or you got beef with someone, I'm using our language, that you are not just, rather be just. It is closer to God consciousness and piety. So that initial step, that's what I'm trying to close with. It's hard to describe. I'm open to anybody else or follow-up questions. That's ultimately what we're judged on. We're judged on the ways and the means. The means and the ends. The ways and the goals. Both must be by what pleases God. But if the ends are not there, the only thing that saves you is that your ways were right, and through your human effort, you ended up somewhere else. By the way, many people suggest this, since this leads us to our next question about evolution. Many people suggest this about Darwin. Darwin, what conclusion did he reach about God? Not initially, but toward the end of his life. Where was he hovering? Yes or no? And all you biologists have learned this in 6th grade. I know you're trying to hide from me. He was moving towards no. But many scholars have suggested don't judge him. Through his human effort and with the weakness and the status of the Muslim Ummah, Allah knows what he was exposed to. If it was by his human effort that he led to this conclusion, earnestly seeking the truth, then it is not beyond God to forgive him or to judge him as he pleases. And if God sees in his intention that he saw evidence and proof for another from a Quranic perspective, then it is God's right to bring him to account as he wills. So this next question on that is, it's too broad for me to cover here. It's about the gap between micro and macro evolution, how you consolidate the theories. I'm going to broaden the question a little bit. If the questioner wants to come up afterwards, or I'll actually be doing, inshallah, a course with the Oak Tree Institute, was mentioned earlier. My first course will be a whole day of this stuff, shattering doubts in faith and examining theory of evolution and science in more detail. Very briefly on the evolution bit. To find fault or deficiency in a theory does not mean that you have to replace it. Everybody with me? And so many people, if you don't, like one quote goes roughly, I'm escaping my mind, but roughly he says, somebody who doesn't believe in evolution is either insane, clueless, or ignorant. The theory of evolution, as has been evidenced by fossils and so on, microevolution of specific species under, whatever conditions and so on, is well evidenced, and it's a good theory. And now a lot of biology is built on it. The scientific merit, religion is not part of the discussion yet. The scientific merit, through the judgment of many, many minds of biology that are impartial, of macroevolution, has big holes that scientifically have not been filled yet. Missing species. Lack of clarity about why cells spontaneously gather into organs and are under the subjugation of a master rather than really a totally different form of existence. I know I'm not doing justice to this topic. It's not enough time. But these are scientifically open questions that have to be examined and you have to be honest with what you know and don't know. I work with quantum mechanics at work every day. I'm the first to admit it makes no sense. Hardly anybody I've ever met has any intuition about it, but it works. And it's scientifically But I'm not going to act here like just because it does something good that I really know what's going on. It's very complicated. So we have to have this humility before our theories. And with the theory of evolution, now I'm going to bring religion into it. As Muslims, we believe that an established fact, a clear fact of science, will never contradict a clear verse or religious proof. And by the way, to this day, it's an open challenge. If anybody finds it, let me know. Nobody's found it yet. There's been no foundational thing that's highly evidenced on both sides that contradict. Where the contradictions happen are where one or the other is probabilistic, open to interpretation. By the way, that includes some religious scriptures. The Quran itself. مِنْهُ آيَاتٌ مُحْكَمَاتٌ هُنَّ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. From it are verses that are clear in meaning. They are the foundation of the scripture. And others are probabilistic. They're open to interpretation. And this is from God's mercy that Islam covers many different cultures and times and places. This is from the flexibility of the religion. Science also, there are things that we know well and there are things we know less well. And I contend very strongly that macroevolution is not on the level of microevolution, and it's not on the level where you put up a poster and convince me that we've connected. And those that want more technical detail, we can go into it, or there's lots of good work we can exchange offline. One last question, thought, closing. Yes. Question is, how strong must our belief in Islam be? Should it be such that we don't consider any religion as even potentially correct, i.e. close ourselves to any other possibility? I'm not going to answer the second part. I don't think I'm qualified or well-versed enough to give a good answer on that. The first part, how strong does our belief have to be? I was covering earlier a little bit with that question mentioned about that first step. Let me take care of it for you. What are the five pillars of Islam? No, don't say them. What's number one? Oh man, you don't know? Man, this whole speech I've been at. Shahada, right? Testimony of faith. Ashhadu, I bear witness that there is no God, none worthy of worship except for Allah, God Almighty. And I bear witness that Muhammad is His servant and messenger. I want to ask you a question. God forbid, if in front of the road, in front of the building here on the road, there's a traffic accident. There's two parties to an accident, and you're a witness. Fast forward a couple weeks, you're brought before the judge. What's one of the first things that's going to happen? What is he going to want to make, or she want to make sure of? Did you witness it? Meaning, did you see it? Are you an eyewitness? Or did you hear it from your neighbor's second cousin's neighbor who was on the phone overseas? You see the difference. The testimony of faith in Islam is fascinating because there are multiple words in Arabic for seeing. For example, Prophet Yusuf in the Quran, when he said, I see a vision, a dream, what did he say? What Arabic word? Inni ara. So this ru'ya can be more abstract. Ashhadu in the Arabic language bears two meanings. The more common one is I see, and the acceptable one is I testify. So the least of faith is that you can testify, you can say that this is true and real. You bear witness that there's none worthy of worship except for Allah. And that's why there's people, we're taught, that they come in the grave and they know the three questions. Who's your Lord? Right? Why can't they answer? They've been saying it all their lives. Because their lives were not a testament to what they said on their tongues. Everybody with me? So they're not able to answer. On the day of judgment, the first three cast into hellfire are what? A courageous man, a religious scholar, and a person who used to give enormous amounts of wealth. Because God brings them to account, each of them for doing it for the wrong reasons. So the least of faith is that you live and testify that this is a reality. And this, let me emphasize again, if you forget everything I said, remember this. This is an active process. The Quran says, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know with certainty that there is none worthy of worship except for Allah. وَالَّذِينَ اهْتَدَوْا زَادَهُمْ هُدًى وَآتَاهُمْ تَقْوَاهُمْ. Those that seek guidance, that want it, that are hungry for it, that work for it, God grants them guidance and gives them their portion of piety. And the highest faith is the faith where it's the meaning I see. Ali ibn Abutaleb, may Allah be pleased with him, says, if I saw heaven and hellfire, it would not increase in my certainty of faith whatsoever. Another person says, I believe the messenger more than I believe my eyes, because my eyes might waver and the messenger of God, his words do not waver. Another says, if the sky was split asunder and I saw the matter before me, heaven and hell and so on, it wouldn't affect my faith in God. These are lofty stations not built off of being closed to other perspectives, stations built off of a deep perspective of reality that led them to this conclusion, that this is the ultimate reality, the real truth and the meaning they were seeking for their lives. So there's a gap between us and them, but this is our mandate, this is our challenge. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in closing that He grants us the ability and the sincerity to always be seekers of truth, and to grant us sincerity in purpose and intention, to teach us with that which we do not know and benefit us with that which He has taught us, increase us all in knowledge, to protect our families and to have mercy on our parents as they raised us when we were young, to bring us forth on the Day of Judgment with those that He is pleased with, and to bring us under the shade of His throne on the day when there is no shade but His. Allahumma ameen. May Allah bless all of you and your families. And thank you so much for coming. Inshallah, I'll turn it back over to the program.